Hello, folks. Welcome to Ignore the Machine. That's the name of the show now. That's the name of pretty much everything I do. And we are talking to Jim Sullivan today, a longtime friend who is a longtime writer in the rock biz. And he's got a book now called Backstage and Beyond, 45 Years of Classic Rock Rants, Chats and Rants. It's a two-part series, as I understand it. And we're, kind of celebrating part one. Jim had a get-together the other day at the Paradise, and it was so cool to see all the old school folks and the new school folks. Jim said, hey, let's do a thing. Or I said, hey, let's do a thing, and now we're doing a thing. So welcome, and good morning to you, sir.
We like doing things. Things are good.
This is going to be interesting for me because, I've always known you're a writer for a long time at the Globe. I'm curious, right off the bat, what was the job like? Like, did you actually go into the Globe and write? Did in the movies, did you have a desk? Were there people all around getting stories and stuff? Or did they just call you at home and said, go out tonight and get this story? How did it work?
Well, in many different ways, but yes, I had a desk. I had a pod. I was a freelance writer for the Globe from 79 to mid 88, and then a staff writer from 88 to mid 2005. So yes, I had my own little cubicle. Steve Morse was next to me for a long time, my friend and colleague. And in terms of the way things worked, I wrote at the Globe, certainly a lot. I liked being there. There's a real buzz about being around fellow journalists. And I think it's probably less that way now, the way things have changed and the way people utilize offices. But it was, for me, a good creative writing experience to be around other people who were doing similar things, around editors buzzing about this way and that. So that certainly was part of it. And then, of course, I wrote remotely at home or at a concert site with the old Radio Shack Trash 100 computer, which was not internet connected back in the day. We had those couplers. I don't know if you remember any of that.
No. A modem, you mean? You had to put it like the phone down on this thing?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And what would happen with the Trash 100, which was an upgrade from the Trash 80. The Trash 80 was flat, and the Trash 100 had a screen that popped up, so you could actually read about 12 lines of your copy. And what would happen was you'd do the modem, the coupler, and then you'd hear that noise, and that would mean it would be going through, and you would watch the story line by line by line going through to the other end, and it wouldn't always make it. You kept staring at that, thinking, okay, come on. And then sometimes you'd get midway or near the end and go, and the connection would fail, and you would do the whole thing over again. And I remember one time I was covering Springsteen out at the Worcester Centrum, and I think it was the third try, and I was on the phone with my editor at the time, who said, okay, Jim, if this one doesn't make it, it's just not going to be in the paper tomorrow. And I said, I understand that. Not much I can do. Let's just hope and pray. And it made it. Yay. So it made the paper that day. But those were precarious days with the internet being what it was and machinery being what it was.
So even before that, the people would have to go back to the paper, the physical plant, right? And they have to go back there and write it.
Yeah, that was right. I mean, that not so much for the shows out in Worcester, but certainly anything around Boston that was on deadline. And in fact, I mean, oftentimes we had to leave the show, before the encore, at the encore. And I remember my late friend Dean Johnson, who you knew very well, when Dean and I, we were colleagues at one point, freelance colleagues at the Globe, and then he got a Herald staff job. I got a Globe staff job. So we were friends but competitors, but also on a friendly basis. So if I had to leave before he did, and we're covering the same show, we were very honest with each other. He'd ring up, me at the Globe, and I'd say, okay, what were the encores? And he'd tell me. And I couldn't review them, obviously, because I wasn't there seeing them. But at least I could mention what the encores were, and I would do the same favor for him if that was the opposite case. Friendly camaraderie.
We're speaking with Jim Sullivan, longtime music writer at the Boston Globe and far beyond. You're from Maine, right, Jim?
I am.
Okay. Did you go to school?
You're from New Hampshire.
Yeah. Did you go to school there? And can you bridge the gap between school and getting that job at the Globe? I find that's always interesting. I was a waiter at Fridays while I was starting out. Did you have a kind of job like that, or did you just go right to from 0 to 100?
Yeah, let's see. Maine, University of Maine was where I went, graduated in 1978. Um, what I did was, sorry, um, I came down here, Boston, at the end of 78. I started writing, well, I'd been writing for a magazine called Sweet Potato in Maine, as well as being a columnist for the Bangor Daily News, rock columnist, and then writing for my college paper, the Maine campus. Sweet Potato was based in Portland, and then it opened up a Boston office coincidentally about the time I moved down here. So I continued writing for them, did a little editing here, 78, 79, and met a couple of the Globe people, the late Ernie Santosuoso, Steve Morris, and some others, and got concerts. And I thought, I read what they wrote, and I thought, well, this is certainly something I can do, and I think I'm qualified to do. Let's poke my head in the door. And basically, that's what I did. I was given the opportunity to come in and I guess try out, if you will. Didn't really phrase it that way, but clearly they were, seeing what I had to give and what I could deliver. And evident, I made the cut, I guess, when they bumped me up. They put a tagline under your name, and at the time when you were starting to freelance, it would say special to the Globe. So my byline was Jim Sullivan, special to the Globe. And then after about 10 or 12 concerts, I opened up the paper one day and it had been changed to Globe correspondent. So I looked at that and went, oh, I guess that means I'm a regular correspondent then. So that's how I kind of learned I'd be used more frequently.
That had to be huge for you, man, to be able to go out and have that badge of honor and go to these clubs and the access you gained. Were you nervous at first when you were, they said, okay, Jim, go talk to superstar X, and you're kind of a rookie. Were you ever nervous?
Well, actually, the intro in my book kind of gives a good description of my introduction into the rock interview world. I won't go through the whole story now because it's there, but it was when I was in college, and it was when I was doing college radio. I brought my reel-to-reel tape recorder backstage to interview one of my favorite bands, Slade, 1975. They didn't know I was coming. These were much more informal days back then. And I showed up, the promoter, Andy Gavatzis, great man, kind of walked me backstage, met the band. They saluted me with Big Jim Sullivan, who I didn't know, but was a famous session guitarist in England. So they liked me from my name. And I think they also liked the idea that I was a fan, big knowledgeable fan, who knew the music and loved the music. They were the opening band on a triple bill helmed by ZZ Top. And I was there for them mostly. And we talked, probably an hour or so, taped it, and, we had beers and fun and, body humor and all kinds of stuff. And so I guess my point is that it was the best entry into this rock world that I could imagine. They were friendly. They were superstars in England, but not in America. And they were just extremely down to earth, working class guys who welcomed me into the fold. And I felt very much at ease from the get go. Now, not every interview was like that, obviously. And there were moments that were, tension or, we didn't connect or what have you. But just to get in the door that way and to have the reception be so warm and friendly, and the badinage be so natural. It was kind of like, oh, again, this is something I'm capable of doing, talking to people, and then later getting the words down in print. Although the little codicil to that story, I wasn't yet a writer. This was being done for radio. So what I did was I edited the Slade tape, interspersed it with music, and did probably like an hour-long special on the college radio station, WMEB in Orono, Maine. And, it's funny, it ran once, I'm sure, and, was listened to by, I'm sure, many squirrels and moose and, the occasional student who was up there, because let's face it, we were not a powerhouse station, and who the hell knew who Slade was anyway among our listeners. So, it was I wish I had it, believe me, I wish I somehow had a copy of it. But that was my start. And then the writing for the college newspaper started fairly shortly after that.
So this is Jim Sullivan, and he's a music writer, a longtime music writer, still on the journey. And we're talking about his awesome new book called Backstage and Beyond, 45 Years of Classic Rock, Chants, and Rants. This is a good place to talk about a couple of cool stories. Yeah, of course, you can't tell them all, don't want to tell them all, but if you'd grace us with anything you got, or anything you choose, it'd be fun.
Well, I'll tell you this. The layout is this. It starts with Jerry Lee Lewis. It ends with Roy Orbison. And in the middle, there's Bowie, the Kinks, Roxy Music, Richard Thompson, Nico, Marianne Faithfull, Tina Turner, a whole lot of people. And the shape of it is starting with Jerry Lee and ending with Roy. I wanted to focus on artists that began their careers in the 50s and move it through artists who began their careers in the early mid-70s. Volume 2, which is out October 19, picks up from bands that started in the mid-70s onward. And as you can imagine, that would be punk, post-punk, and new wave. Although in the first book, we have people who were there kind of forming that sound with Lou Reed and Iggy Pop and others. But starting off with Jerry Lee, very conscious decision, because in some ways it's the best story. It's the most controversial story. Jerry Lee and I, for some reason, got on very well for about 6 years or so. When he came to Boston, we would talk after his shows. This would usually be at the Channel, sometimes up at the Club Casino in New Hampshire. And we clicked for whatever reason, whether he was drinking or not drinking, whether he was with one of his wives or girlfriends or not. And he let me in on his world, and he did not hold back. There's stuff in the book you will read from Jerry Lee, and you will go, my God, what an asshole. And, some readers have said exactly that. And I said, well, whatever you take out of it is fine. And that's not inaccurate. The other, although I would also say there was kind of a weird friendship that we had as well. The most controversial part, I suppose, is he may or may not have been involved with the death of one of his wives. And one of the interviews I did with him, it was done several months after Rolling Stone had written a story that very strongly suggested that he had been complicit in his wife's death. And this was the first interview he had done after that. And I had to ask him. And, when you ask somebody if they killed anyone, it's certainly a question that you might get various responses from. But he explained his situation, his innocence. He knows how it might look suspicious, but he said, I would never harm a hair on anyone's head, let alone kill somebody. Well, okay. He did shoot his bass player, Norman Owens, in the chest once. He also, this, I believe, was a drinking joke while drunk when we were talking about going up to Elvis's mansion with a gun, drunk. And I said, well, what were you doing up there? What did you intend to do? So what do you think I intended to do? I said, I intended to kill him. That's what I intended to do. And, again, joke, not sure. Jerry Lee went all over the place. And then the other side to him was religious. He talked a lot about heaven and hell, where he was going, where he thought he would go. He believed heaven. He also talked about the famous quote about dragging his audience to hell. Was he doing that? He didn't know. He would reverse himself. He'd say, I don't think so. Maybe I am. So he was kind of all over the map. And I was fortunate as a writer to have that inclusivity for that length of time. So that chapter skips over, a lot of territory. Jerry Lee nearly dying himself at several points during that time. The fact that we at one point just wanted to write a book together, which was also, we were at the Bottom Line in New York, and after the show, both of us drinking whiskey, and it just seemed like a good idea at the time. And nothing, Hellfire had come out, Tasha's book, but there had not been the official bio yet. And we were talking and yeah, this will be great. Let's do this. Right, let's do this. And in the cold light of day, or hungover, however you want to put it, I know I came to my senses and said I could not spend the time it would take to do this 2 years or whatever it might be of my life with Jerry Lee Lewis, listening to him tell tales, bend the truth, shall we say. And, it never came up. I never on my end or his end again. That was kind of the end of that. Anyway,
Sounds like a volatile character.
a very volatile character. He did threaten to kill me at one point, but that was a joke. That was a joke. He said that was, I think it was after one of the shows at the channel. That was the best damn show you ever seen. You give me a bad review, you dead.
I see. He's a guy that went all the way to kill right off the bat. There was no gray area.
No, he could go there. It was a quick-witted man, and many aspects to him. So I think one of the good things about the chapter is, he does let all of those things go, and you can end that chapter, sit back, and go, I'm not, what do I think of this guy, his music, his life. He was obviously, one of the most influential and charismatic performers rock and roll has ever had, and yet, a lot of damage done. So
Martin wants to know where you can get the book.
You can get the book. Oh, that's a great question. Amazon, of course, has it, and the publisher is Trouser Press Books, and that's trouserpressbooks.com. And Trouser Press Books is the company started by Ira Robbins, who was the publisher of Trouser Press magazine back in the 80s. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. NME, Trouser Press, and Sounds, I guess, were the three that I would read.
It was a good one. I was a contributor back then, and I've been friends with Ira for a long time. We were in touch, and he started this company a few years back, and we got to talking about me writing down these stories last summer, and I'd had encouragement from others to do the same. My wife, Rosa, certainly thought it'd be a good idea, Facebook friends, other friends. And I just kind of had this sort of time I could do it, and the impetus to do it, and the encouragement of Ira as a publisher to do it. And I just kept writing. And it got to the point, I kept turning chapters in, and Ira kept saying, yeah, that's good. This is really good. I like this. Keep it coming. And I did. And the project swelled quite a bit. I wasn't thinking about length. I wasn't thinking really or organization. I just kept writing. And we got to the point where Ira said, I think we have 2 books here. And I said, well, do we? Yeah, maybe. He said, yeah, you don't want to put out a book that's a doorstop, a 500-page thick tome, that no one wants to pick up because it's too heavy. So we decided to divide them as we did. And the intro to both is pretty much the same, a little bit different, but obviously the subject matter is different. The bands that are covered are different. And, but anyway, if you happy to spin another story or two from the first book if you like. Tell me who you'd like to hear about.
Well, before that, I want to ask about the access you had. For me, being part of the scene, the best thing was the access. You had killer, complete access to anywhere anyone was playing. You didn't really need a ticket. You just wait. The doorman would say, hey, Jim, and you would go backstage, do whatever you want. That had to be awesome, right?
Yeah, it depended. As time went on, things got a little more formal in terms of being set up with backstage passes and publicists, etc. So it wasn't always just a matter of knocking on the door and being waved in by anybody. But yeah, the access was pretty open most of the time. Not everybody wanted a writer backstage, and I understand that. But with a lot of it, especially at the club level, yeah, that was part of it. And so, yeah, it was a good feeling to be able to go in, talk to these people, relate to these people, either before or after the show, and kind of pick their brains, see where they're at.
One of the challenges must have been that you had the unique situation where, unlike most people who would have a cocktail after their work, you would have a cocktail before your work. You'd go to the gig and hang out, and then you would have to perform your task of writing afterwards. And you might not be in the mood. And that was what you had to do all the time. Was that a challenge?
Didn't have to do it all the time. I mean, because some of the times the stories were not written that night. If it wasn't on deadline, it would be a story that would be written tomorrow. So what I would have is notes or interview tapes or what have you to, turn into a story the next day. And in terms of drinking, uh, yeah, I mean, it was funny that cliche question about do you drink on the job, and I guess I was one of the people who could answer and go, yeah, because that's part of the job.
Yeah.
Uh, the idea was to drink, not get drunk, obviously,
Right.
and pretty much I think I was pretty good at holding the liquor or kind of realizing what the job entailed, and yes, also having a couple of drinks to enjoy that part of it too. Um, so no, there wasn't an impediment at all. I mean, it's sort of something that just kind of, I
Right.
guess, is part of what you do. I'm sure you were in that position too.
So, how about one more story? And after that story, we'll talk about your journey after the Globe. And there's a lot of your work and life that happened after the Globe. We don't want to gloss over that. So, I would love to hear another story before we talk about after Globe.
Well, I'm guessing you might want to hear a little bit more about one of your favorites, David Bowie.
Oh yeah, yeah, love to, love to, yeah.
Um, I interviewed him, I guess, probably 3 or 4 times over the years, and met him in person twice. The other times were phone interviews, and uh, Bowie was one of the least intimidating and most conversive interviews I've ever done. Um, a gentleman, witty, all the things you would expect, I suppose, witty, smart, inquisitive. Uh, he One thing I really respected about him was he didn't have an agenda so much as and some people do. He really did listen to the question and responded to it honestly, I think, and with considerable thought. Uh, in one of the a question I would have expected he would have an answer for right away, I said, well, people accuse you of being a stylistic thief or a chameleon, always changing your style and kind of looking at what's hot and trying to glom onto that trend. And, he stepped back and he thought about it for a while and said, well, you know, there's some there's some accuracy in that, uh, and then went on to talk about how he was just so interested and so curious about so many different kinds of music that yeah, he really did have these antennae that were up all the time, and that more than anything, he said, accounted for his changing his style, his performance, his band members all the time, and just looking to do something new and not to be repeating himself. The idea that he put his popular character Ziggy Stardust to bed and moved on to the sort of Plastic Soul period, uh, the working with Eno period, uh, forming the band Tin Machine with Reeves Gabrels after leaving his solo career for a while. Which how many famous artists have done that? Have been famous on their own, superstar, famous, and then decided to leave that behind and be part of a band. And
Right.
that's what he did. And sure, his popularity went down during that period. He played the Orpheum, not the Garden, here in Boston. And he didn't play Bowie solo material. He played Tin Machine material. They had a couple of albums for it. I liked it. I thought it was good. I don't think it was maybe up to his absolute best, but it was a real pleasure to see him doing that and taking those kind of risks, I think, with his career. And, just being very open to change
Right. And
changes go.
and he changed so much in such a short period of time, going through almost separate careers. Like what was Diamond Dogs 74, something like that,
Mhm.
and then boom, 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 boom. As you say, Plastic Soul, and then the Stay, the Thin White Duke, and all that happened in such a short time. I don't want to get off the book, but I'm glad you brought up Bowie. Now, how about the journey after the Globe?
uh, well, let's see. I mean, I did kind of took a break, started writing for the Boston Phoenix. I did some things freelance for the Boston Herald. uh, I did some things later for the Cape Cod Times. Currently, back then too, doing things for WBUR's arts website called The Artery. Back then, I think it's just called Arts and Culture now. Um, and various other rock sites, contributing things to the Rock's Back Pages site in England, and just kind of spreading out and, in a way, getting away from the daily grind of. I don't mean it in a bad way necessarily, but there does become a routine to what you're doing, of what I'd been doing at the Globe day in, day out. And having a little more freedom to pick and choose and do things, and kind of go back into a freelance life that eventually led to the writing of these books.
And that's great. What about the photos that accompanied the articles? Who took those?
Different people. We some great people. Michael Greco, one of them, who you may know. Did you know Michael from back in the day?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He did a thing with me, just like you are, actually.
Oh, great. Very good. Yeah, he was right on the scene, and his photos actually a lot of them will be in the second book, some in the first book. Eric Antoniou did some of them. My wife Rosa was there to do a chunk of them as well. Paul Robichaux contributed, I know a little bit, and Yvette Roberts from New York is in there.
Did Leo Gozbekian do any for you?
Yes, I believe Leo's in there as well. Good, thank you. Linda Robbins, who is Ira's ex-wife, she contributed some things, and we're still actually getting pictures together for book 2. Oh, Douglas Quintel, Emerson professor and good friend of mine, he's in there as well. So a whole lot of different places. We did a pretty extensive search to try to find photos we could use, and frankly, I mean, we're working on a fairly low budget. It's a DIY production, indie all the way. So we didn't exactly have unlimited cash to spend on these things. So we were very fortunate to have people who were willing to work at a lower rate.
Yeah. Backstage and Beyond, 45 years of classic rock, chats, and rants. By Jim Sullivan. There's a two-book series. The first one is out. It's red. It's the red one. And
the blue one is coming, yes.
and it's available at Amazon, or if you want to go to Trouser Press directly, I guess you can. I really appreciate
Bradley, the other thing, let me just mention while I just thought of it. We just got a notice from the Boston Public Library yesterday that they have bought the book, so it's in the Boston Library, or will be soon. The Brookline Library also has it in there. And I am doing a reading November 16th at the Brookline Library in conjunction with the Brookline Booksmith. And it'll be focusing probably a little more on book 2, but both books will be there. And I'll hopefully read some things from both of them as well.
All right, there are books and there are books. And this is a book, my friends, that you definitely, if you're into music, you're going to love this book and its sibling that's on the way in October. Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please say hello to your lovely wife, Rosa.
I shall.
All right. I will talk to you soon. Maybe, whenever you're in the mood, you got anything to talk about, you let me know.
I will let you know, and hopefully I'll be back in the seat when book 2 comes out.
Okay.
Sound
Take care,
good?
Jim. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
and
brother.
everybody, if you're watching this, do us both a favor. Help us out. Share it. It'd be a big help. All right. Goodbye, all. Jim, you stay.